The streets of Concordia had never seen her like this. For years, Rose had ruled from behind doors lined with silk and secrets, her power spoken only in whispers, her name a signature on the wind, never a presence in the fire. She had been beauty, precision, control. But this morning, as sunlight fractured through the high mists and warmed the quiet stone alleys, the city saw something new. They saw her, in armour, not gilded robes, not a jewelled corset or fur-lined cloak. Fire-kissed armour, scorched crimson and ash-black, hugged her frame, etched with unfamiliar runes that pulsed low and steady like a beating heart. Her walk was deliberate, every step silent, measured, terrifying in its restraint. At her hip, a coiled bullwhip, long rumoured, never seen. Around her neck, for all the world to witness, hung the fire-heart crystal, the last remnant of Eldemire's forbidden core, glowing visibly with unnatural heat. Its light bled through the slits of her armour like molten truth. And behind her walked Lyra, blades visible but eyes downcast, her silence doing the talking. Lady Vess flanked the other side, cloaked in dignity and barely leashed discomfort. She smiled at every passerby they passed. No one smiled back. The three of them moved through Concordia like prophecy written in iron. People stopped what they were doing. Merchants froze mid-haggle. A child pointed and asked something her mother refused to answer. Some whispered. Others bowed their heads, not in reverence. In calculation. For years they had spoken of Rose in rumours. Today they saw the myth walk by. They didn't speak to her. They didn't dare. She did not look at them. She was already looking ahead. The house of silver mirrors stood in the distance, chipped and cracked, its banners long torn, its sigils split down the middle like a scar that had refused to close. The gates hung loose, one dragging along the stone, the other crooked on a single hinge. Rose walked through the front entrance without pausing. No guards stopped her. None dared. Inside, the shattered beauty of her former world lay exposed. Elegant destruction, memories trampled by soldiers and blood-stained robes. The silence inside was not peace. It was an invitation. She stepped into the grand hall, boots echoing where once only whispered deals had tread. She paused beneath the fractured arch of the upper gallery and slowly, with precision, unclasped her cloak and let it fall. The fire-heart crystal caught the morning light and magnified it. "I want everyone watching to see this," she said calmly. Lyra took her place at the side of the room, gaze sharp. Vess lingered near the hall's centre, uncertain. Rose raised her voice, not loud but clear, measured, deadly. "To those still hiding," she said, her voice like the edge of a wineglass, "your time is up." She extended her hand, just a flick of the wrist. A trail of flames snaked out across the floor, curving in a perfect arc, igniting the remnants of Draven's banners in a single breath. "To those still loyal to ghosts, you now serve me, or you serve no one." She stepped forward as the room began to glow in orange reflection. "Let the house burn," Rose said. "Only the right ones will rise from its ashes." The flames curled upward from the banners, smoke rising in thin trails through the cracked ceiling. They burned clean, not wild, but controlled, like everything Rose touched. She didn't turn to the gathering shadows beyond the archways. She didn't need to. They were already watching, but Lady Vess stepped forward. She moved with practiced grace, the hem of her cloak brushing the scorched tiles as she turned to face the open corridor and raised her voice, soft, but clear, trained, political. "To those who still remember what this house once stood for," she began, "I am still here." A pause, just long enough. "I survived what Draven tried to erase. I carry the knowledge of every oath, every alliance, every name that made this place strong. But the future of the Silver Mirrors does not belong to memory. It belongs to those willing to rebuild it." She turned slowly, letting her voice echo. "Those who served with loyalty, You will be protected. Those who betrayed this house. You've already heard the fire speak. In the corner of the hall, Lyra leaned against a half-cracked column, one boot braced behind her, arms folded. She wasn't even pretending to be subtle. Her eyes scanned the darkened edges of the room, the stairwell, the second-floor balcony, the hall to the east. Watching, waiting, daring. A figure shifted behind a column, flinched too quickly, then stopped cold under Lyra's stare. She smiled. Not friendly. More like a wolf who had heard a twig snap. Vess continued, unaware, or pretending to be. We don't ask for blind faith. We ask for presence, for rebuilding, for strength with purpose. She gestured toward Rose, who stood still at the center of the firelight, the crystal at her chest gleaming like a third eye. We have leadership again. But know this, your loyalty now won't be judged by the words you speak. It will be measured by what you do next. A heavy pause followed, the silence held. Then a voice, a rough one from the balcony, called down, and if we don't want to serve her. Lyra's foot shifted. Rose didn't answer. Lyra did. She drew one of her knives slowly, held it at her side, and said in a low, almost amused tone, "Then you'd better start running." A few nervous murmurs rippled in the shadows. Rose finally lifted her head just slightly, letting the room breathe again. Vess stepped back, her role finished. For now. And the House of Silver Mirrors held its breath, waiting to see who would kneel and who would burn. The silence after Vess's speech hung like a held breath. Then Lyra moved, fast, too fast for the eye to follow. Her body twisted, arms snapping upward as a flash of steel left her hand like lightning loosed from a bottle. The blade flew true, arcing up toward the second-floor balcony, where a faint glint had caught her eye. Metal, glass, something hidden behind a shadowed curtain. Thwack. A scream tore through the rafters. The dagger snapped back to Lyra's hand, wet with blood. The echo of the cry still rang through the stone when the shadows answered. Figures exploded from the alcoves, from behind columns, from the stairs above and the cracked doorways below. 10, maybe more, Black Dawn, armed, masked, and already mid-attack. The crowd of Concordians scattered like birds from a bell tower. Screams erupted, feet pounded across stone, someone knocked over a brazier, flames licking across the broken tile. Vess ducked just in time as a curved blade missed her throat by inches. Lyra didn't flinch, her second blade was already in hand. Finally. Rose didn't move at first, not fear, calculation. Then the whip at her side uncoiled like a serpent awakened. With a crack of thunder, the enchanted leather lashed outward, wrapping around the wrist of the closest assailant mid-air, yanking him down so hard he cracked the stone floor. Another charged her from the flank. Rose spun, sweeping the whip in a flaming arc that ignited the air in front of her, forcing him to retreat or burn. Vess backed toward the center of the hall, ducking low, calling out in a voice edged with command. "Protect the lady! Bring the mirrors down!" 3 Black Dawn soldiers ignored her completely, targeting Rose. Lyra intercepted 2, blades dancing, carving tight arcs that left blood in their wake. The third reached Rose Dash, only to be caught by the whip around his neck, yanked off balance and thrown into the pillar behind her. "You really thought this was still your house?" Rose hissed under her breath. More figures dropped from the balcony above. One hurled a smoke sphere, shattering in a hiss of chemical fog. Visibility vanished. Only firelight flickered, screams, clashing steel. The sound of Lyra laughing under her breath as she moved through the haze like a demon from some old elven tale. Rose stood in the eye of the storm, crystal at her chest glowing brighter with every breath. And the House of Silver Mirrors? It was no longer a hall of memory. It was a battlefield. As Rose and Lyra go back to back, exchanging banter and clearing the House of Silver Mirrors one body at a time while keeping Vess alive and pinned in the middle of their fire and steel. Smoke filled the great hall like a curtain of war. Sparks danced in the haze, and the black dawn descended like wolves, sure they had the numbers. But they'd made one fatal miscalculation. They thought Rose was just a name. They didn't realize she was the fire they used to whisper about in fear. A dagger whistled past Lyra's cheek. She spun, caught the attacker's wrist mid-swing, and drove her elbow into his jaw with a crunch that sent him crashing into the wall. She looked toward Rose through the haze. "You couldn't have warned me they'd be throwing a party." Rose's whip cracked in reply, a burning arc slicing through the mist as it coiled around a Black Dawn soldier's leg. She yanked hard, dropping him just as he lunged for Vess. "I didn't send the invitations." Another enemy came from the right. Rose spun, letting the flame surge through the whip's length. It roared as it snapped forward and lit the soldier ablaze mid-air, his scream muffled by the smoke before he hit the floor in a heap of burning cloth. Lyra deflected two incoming blades at once, twisting into a spin that left both attackers bleeding and stunned. "I like you better like this," she muttered, angry, covered in soot, whipping people. "Don't read into it," Rose said dryly, then cracked the whip again, the fire trailing like a comet through the smoke. Near the center of the chaos, Vess crouched, daggers drawn but defensive, more mouthpiece than fighter. She shouted toward the hall's east wing, "Get those gates sealed!" One of the attackers turned toward her. Lyra saw it first. "No, you don't," she growled, leaping across the ruined floor in a heartbeat. She slammed into the would-be assassin blade first, pinning him to the ground with a grunt. "You want her, you go through me!" From behind her, Rose called out, "Try not to kill them all too fast. I'd like one left breathing." Lyra smirked, never breaking stride. "Then you'd better slow down." More Black Dawn poured in. 5 left, maybe 6, masked and focused. But they weren't coordinating anymore. They were reacting. That was the mistake. Rose flicked her wrist again, the whip alight, flames curling in midair like it had a mind of its own. She lashed it once, slicing through a pillar support, and the stone crashed down between her and the last 2 attackers, cutting them off. They backed away. Too late. Rose stepped through the falling dust, the crystal at her chest glowing like a heartbeat of molten light. "You should have stayed in the dark," she said softly. Then she struck, 3 lashes, precise, burning, final. They didn't rise again. Lyra wiped a smear of blood from her jaw and exhaled as the last echo of footsteps retreated into silence. Vess stood slowly, eyes wide but unshaken. Rose turned to both of them, the firelight dying slowly across the floor. "House reclaimed," she said. And this time, no one questioned it. The last scream had already faded. The smoke curled lazily now, drifting through broken windows like it no longer had purpose. Ash coated the floor like snowfall. The only movement was the soft crackle of scorched banners and the slow, deliberate coil of Rose's whip as she wrapped it back at her side. All 10 were dead. Burned, broken, crushed beneath collapsed stone or bleeding across the black marble. Lyra paced the hall once more, blades lowered but still in hand. Her eyes scanned for movement, but there was none. "That's the last of them," she said. Vess straightened from her defensive crouch, hair mussed, cloak torn. Her voice was tight. "Is it over?" Rose stood still for a long moment in the center of the ruined hall. The fireheart crystal still glowed against her armor, but dimmer now, calmer. She looked around at the bodies, then exhaled quietly. "I should have kept one breathing." Lyra arched a brow. "Didn't feel like you were in the mood for subtlety." Rose gave a humorless half-smile. "I wasn't." She stepped over the nearest corpse, eyes sharp but the heat in her voice cooling. "They were sent to die, not to speak." Vess moved to her side. "Then whoever sent them knows us too well." Rose glanced up at the shattered crest above the hall, the stone still smouldering from the flames. "They'll know more soon enough," she said. Then, with a slow turn, she looked toward the door, out toward Concordia. Because this time, we're not hiding either. Somewhere deep beneath Concordia, beyond the reach of rumour and daylight, Syrien watched the flickering mirror. It was fractured, half covered in soot, and bound to a network of stolen sigils and butchered scrying marks. The image wasn't clear, but it was enough. Flames, smoke, the shattered house of silver mirrors, and her, Rose, wrapped in fire-kissed armour, crystal blazing at her throat, whip in hand like something pulled from a storybook soaked in blood. Syrien grinned. She leaned forward on her elbows, her chin perched in one gloved hand, the fingers of the other tracing lazy circles in a pool of ash spilled across the warped table before her. "Well, well, well," she purred. "The girl burns down the house and wants applause for it. Isn't that cute?" Behind her, shadows flickered against the stone walls. No sound answered her voice, no movement. But she tilted her head anyway, listening. "I know, I saw it too," she whispered. "She's still so contained, like fire in a lantern. But you said she'd crack. You promised, remember?" Silence. Syrian's smile widened. "Oh, don't sulk. You had your moment, your glorious, world-ending, soul-splitting moment, and now look at us." She turned her head slowly toward the darkened corner of the chamber where a single cradle sat shrouded in shadow, silent, unmoving. "We're legacy now." The mirror crackled with another pulse of static light, rose again, this time mid-strike, her whip catching a soldier by the throat and yanking him into fire. Syrien watched it play out, lips parted slightly in admiration. "She's faster than she used to be," she muttered. "Sharper, like a knife that finally stopped pretending to be silverware." She stood then, bare feet soundless on the cold stone, and drifted toward the mirror like a ghost caught in the pull of memory. "She doesn't know, does she?" Syrien whispered. "Not who you are, not who I am." She placed her palm against the warped glass, smiling faintly at the image flickering within. "But she will." Her voice dropped lower, almost fond. "And when she does, I wonder if she'll cry." Syrien turned from the mirror, her expression softening into something twisted and warm. She crossed the room, bare feet gliding over cracked sigils, and knelt beside the shadowed cradle. Her fingers traced the edge, affectionate, reverent. "He's getting louder," came a voice behind her, one of the mages draped in grey. Careful, measured. "He's waking," Syrien replied, not looking up. "Just like his father did." The mage stepped forward slowly, holding a rune-scrawled tablet. "We've completed the transfer glyphs. The fallback realm is ready, remote, quiet, hidden behind 3 veils." She stroked the curve of the cradle's hood, humming softly. "We strongly advise you accompany him, Syrien. The flames in the city are spreading. If she—" Syrien snapped her fingers and a jet of violet fire flared between them, not aimed to harm, but enough to silence. "If she comes," Syrien said, standing, "then the fun's just starting." The mage stiffened but said nothing more. "Move him," Syrien said at last. Her voice was soft, absolute. "Make sure the shadows on the other side know he's not to be touched, not seen, not even whispered about." She turned back toward the mirror, eyes wide with manic light. "He's not ready yet." A pause. "But I am." The flames from the mirror pulsed again. Rose's reflections smeared and wreathed in fire. Syrian's smile sharpened. Let her have her little house of mirrors. The map was painted in light. Not ink, not parchment, but flickering runes projected across the cavern wall like shifting constellations, each flare marking a black dawn cell, a hidden cache, a listening station buried in Concordia's crumbling bones. Most were blinking red now, fading, dying. Syrien stood barefoot in the centre of it, her silhouette cast tall and jagged in the flicker, her coat hung open wild around her ankles. Ash stained her hands. "One by one," she whispered. "Our little stars go out." She turned slowly to face the gathered few, what remained of her inner circle, mages, scouts, operatives, all loyal, all afraid to speak first. She smiled. Time to blow out the candles. Her hand swept down, and the map vanished in a pulse of violet light. "Pull every asset from Concordia. No delays, no second chances. Burn it if you must, but get them out." The group moved quickly, heads bowed, orders whispered into enchanted stones. Except for one. Ralos, the eldest of her surviving generals. Scarred, heavy-voiced, tactician to the bone. He didn't move. Instead, he took a step forward. "With respect, if we pull out now, we lose the networks we built here. The informants, the weapons caches, the dash." Syrian's head tilted. "Respect?" Her smile turned slow, dangerous. "I don't want your respect, Ralos. I want your silence." He didn't flinch. "You've risked too much. You've become visible. That fire witch is consolidating fast. If she strikes before we're ready, you—" Syrien stepped forward, her voice low and sweet. "I've already been struck." She placed a finger gently on his chest. "Stabbed, shot, burned, buried. And you know what I've learned, Ralos?" "A beat. That I don't break." She leaned in, whispering now. "I evolve." Then, without warning, her hand snapped upward, gripping his jaw. Magic bloomed. A violent surge of dark light flared from her palm, and with a flash, Ralos dropped, twitching, gasping, breath stolen from his lungs. She stood over him, smiling faintly. "I said pull out." The others nodded, retreating quickly to obey. Syrien turned back toward the stone balcony above the war room, stepping out into the cold air of the surface, wind catching her coat like wings. Below, the ruins of Concordia flickered in the distance, smoke curling lazily above the skyline where the House of Silver Mirrors had burned again. She exhaled. "I'll stay," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. The Queen should always see the final act. She rested her hand on the balcony rail, watching the world with hungry eyes, and behind her, the child's absence lingered like a heartbeat in another room. The fires outside had dulled. The last of the Black Dawn assets had vanished into the veils, leaving Concordia behind. But Syrien remained. She sat alone now, cross-legged before the cradle of ash and ember that served as her shrine, his shrine. A small basin of scorched obsidian, once used for scrying, now filled with charred feathers and flaking sigil stone, remnants, echoes. The glow of the mirror had faded, but in her mind, she still saw it. Rose, standing tall, cloaked in heat and light, unbroken. Syrien stared into the embers, speaking softly. "You said she'd fracture. You said the fire would hollow her out." The basin didn't answer. She leaned forward, voice lower now, more desperate. "Tell me again what you want." For a moment, only a breath, something stirred in the ashes. A flicker, a curl of smoke shaped like a claw or a crown or a whisper. Syrian's eyes widened, and then she smiled. "A wolf?" she breathed. "Yes, of course, the spectre wolf." She sat back slowly, fingers curling against her palms, nails digging into scarred skin. "I'll find him," she whispered. "I'll find the ghost who walks with death." The ashes shifted once more, then stilled, and Syrien began to laugh, soft at first, then deeper, until it echoed through the hollow stone around her. She didn't notice the blood at her fingertips, only the fire behind her eyes. The fire had long since died. Only blackened stone and scorched banners remained, the grand hall of the House of Silver Mirrors reduced to smoke-kissed silence. Yet in the ruins, life stirred again. Lady Vess moved through the corridors like a ghost made flesh. She wore dark robes embroidered in silver thread. Not regal, but precise, measured. Her every step echoed with old authority, tempered now by ash and memory. She didn't bark orders. She gave invitations, and they carried weight. "You stayed," she told an old seneschal lingering near the wrecked gallery. "That means you remember what we once were." To a former steward clutching a damaged ledger, "I have not forgotten your service, nor the names you protected when others sold them." One by one, they began to nod, to follow. Not all, but enough. Lady Vess was rebuilding, not from loyalty, but from need. And that was more durable than love. Lyra crouched over the corpse before the eastern arch. It was the first one she'd dropped, clean, efficient, a throw without hesitation. The body still lay in the dust, face down, blood soaked into the cracked tile. She flipped him over carefully. No insignia, no identifying marks. But the weapon lying beside him? That was something else. She picked it up, holding it with care. Black, sleek, pulse vents along the sides still faintly warm. A Black Dawn rifle. The same type Echo Division had recovered before. Her thumb brushed across the emitter coil, and the memory clicked into place, the fortified outpost. The blast patterns that didn't match conventional tech. She frowned, rising to her feet and slinging the rifle over her shoulder. This wasn't standard issue. This was a message. Rose stood at the edge of the central balcony, overlooking the ruined courtyard below. Her armor was still singed at the edges, the fire heart crystal resting against her chest like a still-burning wound. She hadn't spoken much since the battle, not to Lady Vess, not to Lyra. She had nothing left to prove. Now it was about control. A quiet knock echoed from the corridor. Jiro stepped into view, handing her a small scroll, delivered not by courier but by whisper. No signature, just a familiar weave in the wax seal. Rose broke it with one sharp flick. The contents were short. "The house would like your presence, tonight. No games." Her brow arched slightly. So they wanted her to show up, to remind Concordia who whispered loudest when the knives were drawn. She rolled the scroll tight and tucked it into her bracer. No response needed. She would go. Because fire might reclaim a house, but whispers still ran the city. The city was holding its breath. As Rose moved through Concordia's back streets, whispers slid between doors and under stones, but they meant nothing without context. Fragments, hints. Not enough. Not for her. She wasn't here to chase rumors. She was going to the only place in the realm that still knew how to sort truth from noise. The House of Night Whispers had summoned her. She intended to hear what they had to say. The alley narrowed, the glyph on the door barely visible even to trained eyes. She knocked, once, pause, twice, pause, once again. The wall shimmered, and without hesitation Rose stepped inside. The halls of the House of Night Whispers didn't echo. That was by design. Every footstep was absorbed by velvet-lined stone, every breath dampened by spells older than most of the city itself. Secrets weren't just traded here, they were protected. Rose followed the servant in silence. The girl was young, robed in grey silk with her hair veiled and her eyes carefully unfocused. She didn't speak, didn't glance back, just moved with the soft precision of someone trained to never draw attention, even while leading the most dangerous person in Concordia through the quiet dark. The passage twisted and dipped, lit only by low glowing stones set into the archways. Each one flickered slightly as Rose passed, recognizing her maybe, or measuring her. Finally, the servant stopped before a tall, lacquered door wrapped in pale runes that looked like nothing at all unless you knew how to read them. She turned to Rose and spoke with rehearsed stillness. "He is waiting." Then she stepped aside and vanished into the corridor, her footsteps fading like mist. Rose didn't hesitate. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The chamber was circular, lined with drapes that shifted subtly in a breeze that didn't exist. Runes hung in the air like dust motes, half seen and half imagined. Lucien stood at the centre, still tall, still cloaked in shadow-coloured robes, still impossible to read. He didn't smile, but his eyes sharpened the moment he saw her. "Rose," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "I'm glad you came." She didn't respond, just moved closer, stopping a safe few paces away. "You called," she said. "I assumed it wasn't to reminisce." Lucien tilted his head slightly as if amused. "Number? But I did want to see you again." He glanced down, as if searching for the right words. "It's not every day that fire walks back into a burned city." She raised an eyebrow. "You didn't call me here for poetry." "No," he agreed. "I called you because Concordia is shifting, and I thought you might want to know who's pushing from below." He gestured toward the centre table, bare except for a single folded piece of parchment resting atop it. "I'll give you a taste," he said almost kindly. "But if you want the full dish—" His smile was sharp now. "We'll have to talk price." Rose didn't reach for the parchment. She studied it, then Lucien, eyes sharp beneath the faint flicker of light. She tilted her head slightly, just enough to signal curiosity without submission. "You want a deal?" she said, not asking. "Fine. Let's start there." Lucien blinked once, not shocked, but momentarily off balance. Rose continued before he could reply. "You want a tether to the portal network, a silent one. No glow, no alerts, no interference with the fire crystal. Just a back door for your agents to move and listen without lighting up every ward in Concordia." She stepped closer to the table now, still not touching the parchment. "You asked for it once, quietly. I didn't answer." She smiled just a little. "Maybe this time I will." Lucien's mouth twitched at the corner. Amusement. Or irritation. Maybe both. "You always were infuriating," he said smoothly. She arched an eyebrow. "You're just upset. I'm not easier to corner." He gestured toward the parchment. "And here I thought I'd draw you in with mystery. You're not the only one who trades in whispers, Lucien. You just brand yours better." He exhaled through his nose. "You haven't changed." "I have," she said simply. "You're just slower to notice." Lucien recovered quickly, stepping aside, hands folded neatly. "Very well. If we're naming prices, then yes. That's what I want. Discreet access, restricted, monitored, and limited to my agents. In return—" He tapped the parchment with a single fingertip. "You get what's in there, and what's not written down." Her gaze sharpened. Now she reached for it. Rose picked up the parchment. She unfolded it carefully, the crisp edges whispering like old paper and colder intentions. She read the first line, and her posture changed. It was subtle, shoulders tightening by a fraction, the fire in her eyes no longer just a glow, but a calculation being rewritten in real time. Lucien watched her, silent now, measuring. She read the second line, then the third. When she reached the fourth, she folded the parchment again with sharp, controlled precision and set it down as though it might burn through the table. "You're sure?" she asked. Lucien didn't smile now. "We don't send false fires." She stared at him for a long moment. Then, "You've seen the child?" "Number, but someone has. Someone who didn't live long enough to lie." Rose's fingers tapped the table once, then stilled. "And you're telling me this? Because?" "I'm telling you," Lucien said evenly. "Because if anyone can finish what started with that child's conception, it's you." He paused. "And I'd rather the fire be on your side than in my halls." Rose's expression gave nothing away. No surprise, no panic, just the faint narrowing of her eyes as if Lucien had confirmed something she'd already suspected, but not yet believed. She let the silence stretch a moment longer. Then, with a tone just above casual, she asked, "And where was this informant found?" Lucien's reply was smooth. "Dead. Dockside. Throat opened, mind shattered. But his blood held enough of the sigil residue we needed." Rose gave the faintest nod. And the child? A glimpse, a handler, a brief exchange. But the operative who saw him said one thing before dying. Lucian leaned in slightly. He wasn't born. He was forged. Rose's jaw didn't tighten. Her pulse didn't rise. But the fire heart crystal at her neck pulsed faintly. Just once. She tilted her head slightly, studying Lucien as if weighing something. Then she smiled. Subtle, cool. Funny, she said. You always were better at collecting whispers than reading them. Lucian's brow arched just slightly. Am I? Oh, yes. She circled the table now, slow and graceful. You know a piece. A sliver. Just enough to scare you. And you know more. I know what Draven was hunting when he took this city, Rose said. What he tried to extract from the House of Silver Mirrors before I broke him. Lucian's gaze sharpened. His voice dropped. The archives. Rose didn't confirm. She didn't have to. Instead, she traced a finger along the edge of the table. You've imagined what's in them, I'm sure. Names, deals, failures, blackmail older than most realms remember. She paused just behind him, voice like silk drawn across steel. Now, imagine if I opened them again. Carefully. With the right audience. Lucien turned slightly. Are you offering them to me? No, she said smoothly. I'm offering a possibility. She moved back to the parchment. You give me the child, real, confirmed, and maybe, just maybe, I'll let you read a name or two. Lucian was quiet. Then, you're dangling a lightning strike. And yet, she said, meeting his eyes, you're still standing in the storm. Lucian didn't smile. Not this time. He studied her like a scholar inspecting a rare and venomous creature. Beautiful, yes, but only valuable if you survived the bite. You're very confident for someone walking blind into a city on fire, he said calmly. Rose met his gaze. And you're very brave for someone trying to trade shadows with the one who lit the match. He didn't flinch. Instead, he moved closer to the center table and tapped the parchment again. Once deliberately. Let's not pretend you're in full control here. I gave you a name, a location, and a ghost. One your allies, Alfheim, Echo Division, the Pack, would kill to find before you. Rose's expression didn't change, but her posture stiffened just a fraction. Lucien's voice dropped, silk over steel. They're hunting him too, harder than you are. You think your secrets will buy you time. But time, he leaned in, is what you're out of. For a beat, nothing moved. Then Rose stepped forward, measured, precise. No, she said softly. You've just forgotten how I use it. She leaned forward across the table, barely a whisper between them. If Alfheim or the Pack finds him first, they'll quarantine him, study him, hide him. Her voice was ice now. I'll end him. Lucien blinked, not because she shocked him, but because she meant it. You don't know what he is, he said. I know what he could become, she replied. The room held its breath. Then Lucien slowly, very slowly, nodded. I'll get you the next location, he said. But when I do, you bring the archives. Rose turned without another word, her cloak catching on the edge of the shadows like flame against velvet. At the threshold, she paused. I'll bring what's necessary. Then she was gone. The scent of polish and scorched velvet filled the air. The House of Silver Mirrors was far from whole, but Lady Vess moved through the halls like it already was, her cloak trailing like a banner behind her, her voice rising and falling with the rhythm of a woman who had commanded rooms long before they fell to ash. Drape the windows. No banners until the sigil's reforged. I want the marble in the east wing cleared by nightfall. If it can't be saved, replace it. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Every former steward, every hesitant retainer who'd answered her summons had fallen into step like dancers returning to a familiar waltz. They obeyed because she made them believe the house still mattered. Because she believed it. Lyra sat on a low windowsill, one boot propped up, elbow resting on her raised knee. She watched the bustle unfold with the same expression she wore in war councils. Detached, faintly irritated, always scanning. One of the servants tripped over a cracked tile. Vess barely looked up. "Fix that, no limping lines." Lyra sighed audibly. A younger attendant glanced at her nervously, then looked away just as fast. She muttered to herself, "I've killed demons faster than she's folded tablecloths." Another servant bowed as he passed Vess. "Lady Vess, should we begin restoring the Hall of Whispers next?" "No," Vess said, not missing a step. "That part of the house stays sealed, for now." Lyra arched a brow. That was interesting. She'd ask Rose about that later, if she cared enough. She leaned her head back against the stone and closed her eyes. This wasn't a battlefield. It was a rebuild. And Lyra hated rebuilding. "Still here?" came Vess's voice, smooth as always, but just a touch too sharp. Lyra didn't open her eyes. "Not much else going on." Vess approached with the soft swish of robes and the clipped rhythm of someone walking off frustration. "I've just reclaimed the most powerful house in Concordia from ruin, and you're perched like a gargoyle watching peasants sweep soot." Lyra cracked an eye open. "That's generous. Pretty sure that one just dumped clean water into a bucket of ash." Vess folded her arms. "You could help," she said coolly. "I could," Lyra agreed, swinging her boot down to the floor. "But let's not lie to ourselves, Vess. You wouldn't want me organising flower arrangements." Vess tilted her head. "You're good at killing. That doesn't make you useless when the knives are sheathed." "I like knives," Lyra said, tone dry. A silence passed between them, charged, not hostile. Just enough tension to keep the air from settling. Vess broke it first. "You think I'm wasting time?" Lyra gave a half shrug. "I think you're building a pretty little palace on a foundation that's still bleeding. But sure, hang up the tapestries." Vess's jaw tightened for just a breath. Then she smiled, sharp and not entirely sincere. "And I think you enjoy sitting where you can look down on everyone without being responsible for anything." Lyra stood. Not angry, just done. "I am responsible," she said. "I just don't pretend I'm in charge when I'm not." And with that, she walked past Vess down the hall, leaving the noblewoman staring after her, lips pressed into a thin line. Lyra's boots made no sound as she walked deeper into the east wing. She moved like a shadow, out of sight, out of the script Lady Vess had written for the day. The marble tiles here were cracked, but clean. Too clean. No servants had been sent this way, no brooms, no cloths. Just silence. The same kind of silence that always meant someone was hiding something. She stopped at the end of the corridor, facing a sealed double door wrapped in faded runes and old dust. No guards, no chains, just wards layered in quiet precision. The Hall of Whispers. She ran a finger along one of the runes. Recently reactivated. Whoever locked this place down hadn't done it years ago. They'd done it after the house fell. "Vess, what are you hiding?" she murmured. She slipped a slender blade from her hip, not to fight, but to trace. Lyra was no mage, but she'd learned enough over the years, enough to cut through silence wards and slip through a locked door like breath through cracked stone. The rune dimmed, the air shifted, the doors creaked open half an inch, inviting. Lyra pushed inside. The chamber beyond was circular, vast and still. Dust clung to everything, but the kind that settles only when a room hasn't been touched in weeks, not years. Bookshelves lined the curved walls, but more than that. Mirrors. Hundreds of them. Small, large, framed, cracked, whole. Each one enchanted, their surfaces dulled as if holding their breath. At the far end, a raised platform cradled what looked like a viewing pedestal. Its surface was bare, except for burn marks and melted wax where a crystal mount once stood. Lyra's eyes narrowed. This was it, the archive, or what was left of it. She stepped further in, the door sliding closed behind her with a soft click. The chamber smelled of dust, wax, and faintly burnt silver. Lyra moved through it slowly, one hand on her blade, the other trailing the edge of a cracked mirror frame. None of the glass showed reflections. Some pulsed faintly, others stayed dark. One near the floor hummed, a pulse like a breath, but when she knelt to look, it flickered and went still. Dead connections, severed threads. None of this was alive. None of it was the real thing. She rose, wiping ash from her hand. "This isn't it," she muttered. The mirrors were enchanted, sure, the kind used to monitor conversations, capture glimpses of key players, freeze moments of blackmail and power games. But this was surface-level spying. Not the legendary web of secrets Rose once hinted at. Not the system Draven was hunting. If he had found this room, he would have burned it, torn the stone apart, searching for more. And he hadn't. That meant one thing. This wasn't the archive. It was a mask, a decoy. Her eyes narrowed as she circled the room again, slower this time, looking not for what was shown, but what was missing. Then she found it. A low cabinet beneath the central viewing pedestal, heavily warded, subtle, layered not to guard against entry, but against notice. She crouched, ran her finger along the etched line, and smiled slightly. "You almost got away with it." She didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, she stood and turned slowly in the quiet space, eyes sweeping the mirrors, the furniture, the deliberate layers of misdirection. "If this is what you wanted people to find," she said aloud, "then what are you still hiding?" The chamber didn't answer. But somewhere behind the walls of this ruined house, a deeper secret waited. And Lyra was done sitting still. Lady Vess stood in the central corridor of the restored gallery, her voice crisp as she directed the final adjustments to the light fixtures and rune-woven drapes. "Clean symmetry," she said sharply to the steward. "If I see one more crooked runner, I'll replace the rug with your uniform." The staff moved faster. The house was beginning to hum again, its bones scrubbed clean, its walls already forgetting the fire. She could feel it, control returning, elegance reborn. She glanced around, expecting to see a lean figure lounging in a doorway, arms crossed, eyes sharp with perpetual boredom. But the hallway was empty. No Lyra. Vess frowned. She turned toward one of the nearby guards. "Have you seen the assassin?" The guard stiffened. "She left the main hall 20 minutes ago, milady, toward the east wing." Vess's expression cooled slightly. "Of course she did." She looked down the long corridor that led to the sealed Hall of Whispers, then sighed. "If she breaks anything," she muttered, "I'm telling Rose it was tactical disobedience." She turned away, but her shoulders had tightened. Because the one person she couldn't control was also the one already sniffing around the house's most dangerous secret. By the time Rose returned to the House of Silver Mirrors, the fires were out, the banners replaced, and the marble floors beneath her boots were no longer stained with blood, but scrubbed, reset, curated. Just the way Vess liked them. She said nothing as she entered. Let the staff bow. Let the watchers whisper. Let the city pretend to have seen this before. She walked alone through the grand hall and paused beneath the restored crest of the house, once shattered, now whole again. But even as the symbol gleamed above her, her thoughts were elsewhere. On a child whispered into existence, on a name not written, on a war that was supposed to be over. She looked toward the eastern wing. Lyra wasn't in sight. Good, some secrets even now were worth digging up. Rose exhaled slowly, letting the weight of the city settle over her shoulders. And when she spoke quietly to no one, it wasn't a warning. It was a promise. "Let them think the fire's burned out." She looked to the door. "It always burns lower before it spreads."